Good morning to everyone. This is Chris Marshall from United Collegiate Umpires. I have on the line Alex Scandalis, Dan Miller, and our rules interpreter, Brian DeBrouwer from UCU, as well as the NCAA Secretary of Rules Editor, Randy Bruns, on the line as well. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to take part in our rules conference call. We found it necessary with all of the 2019 rule changes, and there's some pretty significant ones, to put this phone call together just to take some time and try to clear up any questions or concerns you guys may have with these rule changes and to get us prepared for the beginning of our season, which is right around the corner for a lot of us. So, Randy, you there?
I am here.
Okay. Also, we have John Porter on line as well, who's taking part in this phone call. So, Randy, it's your show.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have the opportunity to join you this morning. I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments about, kind of what, obviously there are substantial rules changes for this year. It's certainly something we're all going to have to adjust to a little bit, but I think once we kind of get used to them, I don't think it's anything that's going to be too difficult to make that adjustment. We just need to be aware of it and make sure that we're kind of following along with what's going on here. If you looked at the rules video already, that certainly does a pretty good job of explaining things in there as well. But let me just kind of go through, probably some of the top ones that we get the most questions on. I think that, probably the one where we're getting the most questions probably relates to kind of the change in how we're monitoring defensive conferences, a little bit about the offensive conferences as well. I think the most important thing for people from a coaching perspective is to know is that the rules are virtually the same for a coach as long as you're kind of monitoring what the players are doing while they're on defense. And one of the things I've emphasized to our umpires is that the communication of when a conference is being charged is very, very important. And so I've asked them to kind of redouble efforts to everybody being aware of how many conferences are left and how many have been charged. But from a defensive conference standpoint, there's a maximum of 6, and a coach can be involved in a maximum of 3 of those. So there again, as long as we're kind of monitoring, what the players are involved in, that shouldn't be anything different from a coaching perspective. So, a defensive charge conference or a conference is charged when, someone leaves their position and delays the game, basically. So if a shortstop goes in, leaves his position, goes in and talks to the pitcher, that would be a charge conference. And then, again, everyone should be apprised of the fact that's been charged. Same way with the catcher leaving his position to go out and talk to the pitcher would be a charged defensive conference. So that part, shouldn't be too tough other than just being aware of, kind of getting rid of those incidental ones that keep, kind of going back and forth. One thing about the rule is, if it's a brief incidental communication, it doesn't delay the game. We just got done throwing the ball around. The third baseman takes a few steps in towards the mound, catches the ball, doesn't go all the way to the mound, just tosses it to the pitcher and says, come on, make sure they keep the ball down, back to his position. That's not a charge conference. There's a document that I've got out there that I've asked Chris to kind of forward to you as well, if you haven't already seen it, that lists a number of kind of play situations that are charge conferences, and then also some exceptions to what would not be considered a charge conference. So that might be a good thing to kind of take a quick look at. From a coaching and pitching change situation, the pitching change is required in nearly the same things as they were before. And a coach always has to be involved in something that requires a pitching change. So in other words, a coach makes a second trip to the same pitcher in the same inning, just like always. That second trip to the same pitcher in the same inning obviously is going to require a pitching change. The coach has already been involved in 3 of their other charge conferences already during the game, and now goes out to the mound again. That we need to change the pitcher. If a team overall, the coach has been involved in 3, the players have been involved in another 3, or the players that have been involved in 4 of them, and the coach has been involved in 2 of them, but we've already reached that maximum of 6. And then a coach goes out to the mound, then obviously we also would have a required pitching change. Also remember, just like our rule last year, if the game goes extra innings, there's 1 additional defensive and offensive charge conferences that are allowed. So you get 1 extra one plus any unused ones that you still have remaining for that you did not use during regulation play. And that coach can always be involved in that extra one. So if that game goes extra innings, that coach could be involved in a maximum of 4 of those charge defensive conferences. Anyway, so that's kind of the basics of those. The change with the offensive conference is that we just changed that to make it more fair to everybody from the standpoint that if it's a charge defensive conference, the offensive players cannot just all, like in other words, the pitching coach goes out to talk to the pitcher. In the past, we had, let's say bases were loaded. We had all the runners run over to the dugout and stand there until the pitching coach left, to go back. And if there's no pitching change now, we were having to hustle the players back to the bases and things like that. So in the rule change, you cannot do that without it also being an offensive conference. So in other words, 3 times a game, you could still do that. You would just simply have to take one of your offensive conferences at the same time. Now, notice that a pitching change is not a charge conference. So if you're on defense and you go out there and say, bring in the right-hander, that is not a charge conference, so that doesn't get charged against you. And therefore, from an offensive standpoint, because it's not a charge conference, we actually have a delay in the game to change pitchers. Then the runners are allowed to leave their position. The batter's allowed to go back, in front of the dugout. It's just that, they need to be back at their positions, when that last warm-up is thrown, so the game can be started promptly. So that's really the only major changes with the conference rule. Chris, you want me to just cover these other ones and then leave that question for everything after that?
Sure. Go right ahead, Randy.
Oh, okay. The other slight change from, the last couple of years, which, is always, when it goes against your team, it's always kind of an issue. But we kind of fortified the hit-by-pitch rule. We continued to have people who were intentionally moving to try to get hit by a pitch. And, in my vernacular, it's like, we got people trying to steal first. And that is still not to be condoned nor approved. It's not an easy judgment, but yet it's really, really important. So the way the updated part of the rule goes, there's one benefit given to the offense that we didn't. Probably the biggest complaint that we got was that somehow if the pitcher threw a really bad pitch that was within the lines of the batter's box, and the batter just froze there and didn't move to get out of the way. We were saying, well, you just intentionally froze, so we're going to keep you in the batter's box. So now if you freeze when that horrible pitch by the pitcher is within the lines of the batter's box, you can freeze, get hit, take your first base. Okay, so that's the slight change that's the benefit to the offense. So it's still, anytime you make a movement to intentionally get hit by the pitch in the judgment of the umpire, you're not only not awarded first base, but also the additional penalty is it's a strike added to the account, regardless of the location of the pitch. Before, it didn't seem like much of a penalty, so I could move to get hit by the pitch if I got hit, and the umpire said, nope, you've got to stay here. That was the only real penalty, is just that I had to stay there. And the ball wasn't in the strike zone, so therefore, it was just a ball, and I stayed there. All right, so now if in the umpire's judgment you move to intentionally get hit by a pitch, or you freeze and get hit by a pitch that's not within the batter's box, you stay there, and it's just a strike. Now, that can be kind of important if you got two strikes on your hitter already, and he makes a movement to get hit by a pitch, then obviously that's going to be strike three. The other things that got added to that rule is that, we're tending to have too many people coming out every time. Either the umpire kept the batter at the plate, or if there was a close one and he awarded the batter first base, then one coach or the other tended to call timeout and come out and argue the decision. And it was really judged by the Rules Committee that that's a judgment on a pitch, just like a ball, a strike, or a check swing. So a coach cannot leave your position to argue that play anymore because it's considered to be on a pitch. However, one of the things that can be reviewed is if you're using video review for any of your games, then coach now, that's been expanded. There's more plays that we can review. The coach has 2 challenges that he can use during the course of the game, and one of those challenges could be used to have the umpire crew review that hit-by-pitch situation using review. So that's going to be a slight difference there, just the fact that you can't come out of the dugout to argue that. We understand that that's judgment, but that's just a judgment no different than that 3-2 pitch that's close and is judged either a ball or a strike that goes against your team that way. There were slight differences to the wind-up and set position in just making sure that, before we really didn't specify the position of the feet other than in the wind-up position before, the free foot could be pretty much anywhere. That, to be honest, was causing still a lot of problems with runners not knowing whether somebody was going to wind up or go to the set. So in the wind-up position, the thing that's different there is that the free foot, the non-pivot foot, has to be at least touching the plane of the front edge of the pitcher's plate, or to somehow break that plane, or you can certainly be behind it, but you can no longer have your free foot way out in front of the pitching plate like we could in the past. So from a wind-up position, you still got to have your kind of chest and shoulders generally facing the batter. Pivot foot's got to be just on or in front of and touching the pitcher's plate. And then now that free foot has to be breaking the plane of the front edge of the pitcher's plate. From a set position, your pivot foot now has to be, on or in front of and touching the pitcher's plate and parallel to the pitching plate with your free foot totally in front of it. So your free foot should be able to clearly tell a runner, batter, umpire, whatever, what position you're going to be using as a pitcher, because your free foot is either going to be clearly in front of the pitching plate when you take that initial position, and that's going to be to a set. If it's breaking the plane of that front edge of the pitching plate, then you better be in a wind-up position, because that's what's going on. So the penalties are specified there. The only thing about the penalty is the warning has been. So the warning's been eliminated that was there in certain cases. So the pitcher just has to start out in a legal pitching position. If the base is unoccupied, it's a legal pitch. If there's a runners on, it's a balk, just because people were using that to kind of deceive runners. We did eliminate the feinting to third base from a pitching position. So I don't think that's going to cause much of an issue for anyone there. I think the only other thing kind of in the rule that I know is that we kind of again expanded video review. And so for those of you that are using that, you'll want to kind of take a look at that. As I mentioned, there's head coaches allowed two challenges basically there, and there's 6 additional plays that are allowed to be used also. The other thing we've really emphasized with our umpires and certainly the coaches that I've talked to as well is that, the Rules Committee itself approved a visible clock to be mandated and staged into the game over the next couple of years, but that did not reach the final approval by what they call the prop committee that's required. So it's not mandated, but a visible clock is highly recommended for timing both the 120 seconds in between innings. that part of that rule has been rewritten as far as when the clock starts and so forth. And also then just the 20 seconds between pitches with no base runners on. It is perfectly okay to have a visible clock that you're using only for that interval between innings. If you want the umpires to keep the 20 seconds on the field when there's no runners, that's okay as well. But the point being is that's one of those very strongly recommended pace of play rules, just to kind of keep a consistent time frame between innings in particular. If your game is not televised, where you've got a conference contract, let's say, with the like a commercial break type thing, if the pitcher and batter are both ready, prior to 120 seconds, that's fabulous. That's just the maximum allowed. And of course, common sense things like, they're not done in the fifth inning doing updated facilities, dragging the diamond or something like that. Obviously, you make an allowance for that. But the idea is just to keep the game moving. So those are probably the main ones. If you got questions about the other ones, certainly I'd be glad to try to address those as well.
Randy, it's Chris. Can you just touch on the obstruction rule as well?
Right. Yeah. The only thing we changed about the obstruction rule is actually we didn't change any of the language of the obstruction rule at all. The only thing that changed, and it's kind of a key change, is our definition of when a fielder is in the act of fielding the ball. We had given umpires kind of, in the past we always had a little bit more of a liberal interpretation of when a fielder could be blocking the base. And we've also now expanded that so it's the same for a fielder's making a play at any base, so it's not just at home plate. But the whole idea is that interpretation is more restrictive from the standpoint that if you're going to block the pathway to a base, a fielder has to have possession of the ball before they do that. The act of fielding would only be when everybody's getting there at the same time. In other words, the throw is coming directly at the fielder. The fielder and the runner and the ball are going to get there all at the same time. The fielder is just making that reach to catch the ball. In that case, that would not be obstruction. But anything other than that, the fielder has to have the possession of the ball. So you think about, this could be a shortstop. We've got some examples on our rules video, if you haven't watched that, where a shortstop was waiting for a throw on a steal or a throw from the outfield, and they kind of leaned over to catch the ball, but in the meantime they put their entire lower part of their leg in front of the base. The runner slides in and hits his leg. Then the fielder catches the ball and applies the tag. That's now much more clearly defined as obstruction. So if you think about a catcher, just because, again, their foot would be in the pathway doesn't make it obstruction. But, again, if the runner doesn't have a pathway to the base, tries to slide in, and either has to, can't touch the base because of the fielder blocking the plate of the base, or he slides in and makes contact with the foot or, leg of the catcher before getting to the base, and then the fielder catches the ball and brings the tag down, it's now obstruction. So, again, it's important to teach your fielders, to stay out of that baseline so that you're not at least in jeopardy of getting an obstruction call if the ball doesn't get there quite as soon as they thought it might. Okay. Once you've got the ball in your possession, certainly then you can, reach down, block the plate, make the tag just as you could in the past.
Thank you, Randy. I guess we'll open up for any coach questions right now for Randy.
Randy, Jim Carone here.
Hey, Jim.
Just a question on the video review with the hit by pitch. Are we allowed to go to review just on did the ball hit the batter, did it not hit the batter, or can we go to review on intent, or both?
Well, actually both. Right now all the rule says is just on hit by pitch, situations. So it actually could be both. You just got to understand, especially whether if the ball hits the batter or not. that can be reviewed. A little tricky once in a while with review because you have to have the right angle and be able to tell that there was something where it clearly did or did not hit him. But yeah, either of those right now is reviewable. Maybe if we get some more experience with that after a year or two, we can be a little bit more specific about what can or can't be reviewed there. But right now, it's just on any hit-by-pitch situation.
Hey, Jim, I want to make a couple of points. This is Chris. I know the rule states that with a hit-by-pitch that coaches aren't allowed to argue or come out to argue that play. We are certainly going to ask our umpires to answer questions when they're asked in a respectful way, much like balls and strikes. I think we've all been around the game long enough where a coach may ask where the pitch is, he asks it the right way, our umpires give an honest answer back, as long as it's respectful between the coach and the umpire. We're going to instruct our umpires to do the same thing here. We're not looking to just put the hand up and hold you up or not answer a question when you ask. Now, when it escalates and goes a little bit further, that's when we'll follow through and either follow the NCAA warning system or eject if necessary. But we certainly aren't going to be umpires who are going to sit back there behind the plate and not answer a question if you guys do ask one. We acknowledge that this has been an issue. Hit by pitch has been a big issue for quite some time, so we're going to be understanding of that. And one other point I want to make as well. These hit-by-pitch situations are very difficult for plate umpires oftentimes to see, and there are situations where, and a lot of umpires, myself included, have been in this situation where you may be blocked on a pitch or miss a critical element of that play. That's no different from any other situation where a crew may get together on this, okay? If the plate umpire is blocked or feels that he has missed that critical element, then I have no problem with the umpires getting together to discuss that. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to do that all the time, but like I said, much like any other play on the field where somebody missed a critical element of a call, that might be a situation where our plate umpire, knowing he may have been blocked on something, could go to his crew and talk about that.
Chris, this is Dan Pepicelli. How you doing, buddy? Okay, my question is, I think this is a bigger adjustment than people realize about where the free foot is in the windup. Because if we went to a game, most guys wouldn't have their free foot even or touching the rubber, right? So it has nothing to do with where the post foot's positioned on the rubber. The free foot needs to be even with the rubber or touching it.
Well, just the back of your heel would need to be either touching it or it could be off to the side because obviously.
But it's got to be even with it.
But it's with at least the front edge of the rubber, right? So it can't be way out in front of the rubber like many guys have gotten used to over the past couple of years, few years really. So yeah, it's got to be breaking the plane of the front edge. So it could be off to the side of the rubber still, but the back of your foot, or some part of your free foot, it's got to be touching or breaking the plane.
But the reason why I'm asking this question is because there's the extreme cases of why this rule was maybe put into place, but most guys have a slight stagger to it. A slight stagger where it's not touching. So if I guess, Chris, my thing is if we're going to make sure that, I'm going to adjust all these guys to get there, I want everybody else to be in the same spot as well,
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to make it more consistent so that would be the case. Yeah, because that's a great question. Luckily, the guys with a slight stagger aren't going to have to adjust it very much. The ones that had it way out in front, and those are typically the ones that were also turning their body. The more they put that free foot out in front of the pitching plate is the ones that were also turning their shoulders, so now you couldn't tell whether they were going to, step back into a windup or whether they were actually going to come set. So, so the important part is, getting that heel at least, breaking the plane of that front edge of the rubber.
Okay.
Yeah, and it could just be barely touching, like if they're using the whole rubber. I mean, just the back heel could be touching that front edge of the rubber, and you're in compliance.
Any other questions for Randy? All right, one thing I want to talk about, and another thing that we're going to instruct our umpires this year, with defensive trips, especially with a catcher that's out on the mound, I think commonly we've all seen where a coach will send the catcher out maybe to stall the pitcher or stall to get somebody warmed up in the bullpen. I know this year there is a chance that if the catcher goes out to the mound, the catcher leaves the mound, and now the coach comes out and does not pull the pitcher, you potentially could be charged 2 conferences, which is certainly something that as umpires we want to try to avoid happening out there. So I know Randy has spoken to the umpires in the clinics he's been to, and one thing that we've discussed as an organization is umpires, we are going to look over to the bench to ensure that the coach either is or is not coming out to the mound. But we're going to take it a step further, and we're actually going to look at the manager and actually ask him if he's okay, if he's coming out, if he's all set, just to make sure that we don't run into a situation now where that catcher leaves the mound, the manager comes out, and you potentially have now used 2 trips when you really only wanted to use the 1. Now, obviously, if that manager comes out and makes a change, no trip is charged. But we just want to do a good job. And really this comes down to all situations, especially with middle infielders, catchers. As umpires, we're going to do a really good job. We're going to try really hard to make sure that we're communicating with everybody out there, especially at the beginning of the season, because I know this will be a little bit of an adjustment, especially for middle infielders and catchers that may be used to going and speaking with that pitcher from time to time. So that's one thing that I'm going to instruct our umpires to do, is make sure we're better communicators out there when it comes to these charged trips.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. Because as coaches, we've all seen we want to give that guy in the bullpen a chance to get a couple of more throws in or something like that. As long as you're joining a conference that's in progress, then it's all just the same conference. So the catcher goes out, and now we wait a couple of seconds, and now the head coach who comes out of the dugout or the pitching coach comes out of the dugout. As long as you're on your way out of the dugout and on the way out to the mound, before the umpire signals that conference is over, now then you're just joining that conference in progress. So if you go out there, don't make a pitching change, you're just going to, get charged with that 1 charged defensive conference. And so that, you just want to be aware of that, so that you're using those conferences, wisely, so that you've got plenty of chances to do what you need to do as a coach.
Yeah, I know.
Any other questions for Randy? Okay, at this point I want to turn it over to Dan Miller. He wants to talk about our Coaches Corner. That's one thing that, I really hope that you coaches will take advantage of, because we're going to be posting a whole lot of information throughout the season. I think that will be helpful to you, specifically geared towards the rules. So, Danny, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Briefly, I just wanted to make everyone aware that on our website at unitedumpires.org, we have what we call the Coaches Corner, and some of the content regarding specifically what we've been discussing this morning regarding rule changes. We will have a number of pieces represented on the Coaches Corner. Specifically, we will have the conference call audio from this call. We will have Randy's question and answer slates. I believe that was sent out in a different format to all of you through Arbiter. We will have that in a cleaner version where all of them will be represented. Yesterday we did a College of Charleston team presentation where we had our rules interpreter Brian DeBrouwer, John Porter, and Jim Jackson. They made a presentation to the team that I think would be valuable for all of the different teams to take a look at. We will also have a video related to how we want our plate umpire to communicate the defensive conference, the defensive conferences to your players, to you guys as coaches. it's really important that we create that uniformity. So we will have that video represented. We're going to shoot that this Thursday or Friday, so I would expect to have that up there by this time, next week or certainly early in the week. We will also be posting periodically the rule interpretations that all of you get sent via Arbiter Sports. We will just have them on that section of our website. It's probably easier for you to consume it. Just log on. You can get it there instead of going through the process through Arbiter. One other brief thing, we are producing our preseason video as we have in the past, and predominantly this video is going to be focused on the rule changes that we are discussing today. We have a number of segments recorded with Brian, and we'll have Chris and Alex and John, with their introductory messages like they have had in the past. That's all I have for today, and I thank you all for joining us.
Alex or Brian, do you guys have anything to add?
No. Nothing additional here.
Okay, once again, any more questions for Randy while we have him on the phone here?
This is Randy again. I just wanted to tell everybody have a great 2019 season, and good luck as we start the games here.
Well, Randy, I want to personally thank you very much for taking the time to come on this phone call for us. I mean, you've been great to us and our organization, and always very helpful for us. And to have you on this phone call and helping out with our coaches to start the season off, I couldn't thank you enough. And thank you to all the coaches and administrators that took part in the phone call today. If you have any questions, obviously throughout the season or after this phone call, certainly feel free to get a hold of me or Alex Scandalis for the Division III level. Brian DeBrouwer is our rules interpreter. I anticipate many questions throughout the season, but hopefully this was a good forum for us to start the season out right, and the best of luck to everyone for the 2019 season. So thank you all.